Ready to roll. Turn left. Turn left. Turn left. Turn left. You have arrived at your destination. Your route guidance is now finished. Okay, here we go.
Alright, good evening everyone. John with the International LoneStar. And we're gonna start as we start in with entry pilots for Maryville, Kansas. For members, Rebecca McQuaig and staff, thank you all.
Turn left.
Parents and members, thank you. Rebecca McQuaig and staff, thank you all for your support for the open house at the Club Challenge. And it's been a really fun. We hope to see you all tomorrow at Domo, and we'll go from there. We're going to ride with the International LoneStar to wrap it up. To wrap the grand opening.
Keep right, and then turn right. Turn right. Exit right. Go straight on. Finding a new route. Please, make a U-turn when possible.
Interesting.
And here, the suit between the New York Times Company and OpenAI is illustrative. If the New York Times...
This programming is sponsored by attorney mediator Ron Bankston, providing in-person, video conference, and hybrid mediation and arbitration services. More at ronbankston.com.
Like the kind of day you might need to worry about the grid.
Most people, will walk outside and say, hey, it's not 100 degrees outside. Why is there an issue?
Joshua Rhodes with the University of Texas at Austin says the issue is April is when power plants do annual maintenance. That brings thousands of megawatts offline, making it harder for the grid to handle a burst of heat. Rhodes says climate change is shrinking those maintenance windows.
And so that puts an additional strain on the system because these power plants, they do need to take these outages.
Texas had a big outage in April of 2006, says energy consultant Doug Lewin.
At least some of the major metros at 100 degrees in April.
Two power plants were under maintenance to meet demand during the temperature spike. But Lewin says one of the big differences between then and now is
We do have a lot of wind and solar.
about 40,000 megawatts of wind and 20,000 of solar. Daniel Cohan is with Rice University.
That extra solar supply, which of course comes when it's sunny and when our air conditioners are running most, that provided the difference last summer.
But energy demand in Texas keeps growing thanks to crypto
total production costs of that movie. If they refuse to release it, they can claim the value of the production on their tax ledger for the year. So if it costs them about $40 million to make Coyote versus Acme, then if they bin it, they sort of never release it, they never make money off of it, they're allowed to claim effectively the total value of the movie as a tax loss and write down that debt on their tax statement.
Why not sell it to Netflix or somebody else who will pay them some, percentage of it and get it out that way, make some kind of money?
There's a couple different theories here, and Warner told us that they did not actually receive any official bids from anyone. I'm going to take them at their word there, but a theory that was floated to me by someone who worked at the movie was that if this was a massive success for someone, say Amazon bought it for $70 million and it made a global gross of $200 or $300 million, that would be a black eye for Warner. So it would be sort of an embarrassing failure for unnamed exec A.
Exit right.
You point out in the piece that art has always been commerce,
Exit right.
and these kinds of decisions by companies are not new. Going back to, what videotapes wound up on the shelves at Blockbusters to what gets on streaming. It is, though, a situation now where consumers are more aware of it, right? We're becoming more clued into the machinations.
Absolutely. These are the kinds of things that we're really only privy to people who are reading Variety, who are reading the sort of Hollywood trades. But now we're sort of seeing how this stuff works. It doesn't change what our influence is, though, which I think is a little frustrating and a little maddening for folks. It's that we can see all this stuff happening, but still have no way to actually change it.
Well, it is, and I suppose this is a value judgment I'm about to make here, but it is deeply, deeply cynical. No matter how much debt Discovery and Warner Brothers piled on during that merger, it is a deeply cynical thing to take years of people's work and pretend it doesn't exist so that your accountant looks better.
Absolutely. People are really passionate about this movie, and I think people might turn their nose up at it being a cartoon, but there's still hundreds of folks who put their time and effort and their passion into making this. I think that if this ends up being a tax write-off for Warner, that there's an argument to be made that this should just go into the public record, and we should all be able to see it for free.
Teddy Brown writing in the New York Times Magazine the other day about Coyote versus Acme, which we may or may not be able to see. Teddy, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Guy.
This final note on the way out today. You remember that whole Amazon HQ2 palooza from 5 or 6 years ago? The frenzy, and I don't think that's too strong a word. Tax incentives, subsidies, you name it, were offered by cities eager to get Amazon's second headquarters and the tens of thousands of jobs that would come with it. Well, about that. Saw this in the Washington Post today that instead of the 25,000 new jobs in Northern Virginia that were promised by 2030, Amazon actually cut hundreds of jobs last year. Our digital and on-demand team includes Carrie Barber, Jordan Manji, Dylan Mietinen, Janet Nguyen, Olga Oxman, Ellen Rolfes, Virginia K. Smith, and Tony Wagner. Francesca Levy is the Executive Director of Digital and On-Demand. I'm Kai Rizdal. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APN.
Keep left.
We're about a minute away from 7 on a Tuesday evening on your NPR station, News 87. One last look at the drive home, and we still have a pair of problems in Montgomery County. One of them northbound 45 right at the river. 2 left lanes taken up. The other southbound coming out of Conroe right before Crichton. That wreck is in the right lane.
Support comes from Carr, Riggs & Ingram, CPAs and Advisors, a top 25 nationally ranked full-service accounting and advisory firm offering tax, audit, accounting, consulting, and advisory services. Learn more at cricpa.com.
Overnight low around 72, bit of morning fog, then cloudy with high near 85 tomorrow. Right now it's 80 degrees here at your NPR station, KUHF Houston, News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Thanks, David. I'm Laurie Ramirez. I'm our Executive Director of Content Operations at News 88.7, and we are reminding you it is Trees for Houston Day. During our spring fundraising drive, we're asking you to stand with the journalism that you can trust, like Marketplace, like The Daily coming up in just a minute,
are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment while the House of Representatives is exhibiting to the Senate of the United States articles of impeachment against Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security.
Senators will be sworn in as jurors on Wednesday, but Democrats argue the proceeding is intended for high crimes and misdemeanors, not policy disputes. They are pushing to quash the effort quickly. Claudia Grisales, NPR News.
Missing baggage, disrupted itineraries, and missing refunds are all common complaints travelers make about airlines. And now, in partnership with the federal government, states will be better equipped to investigate those complaints. Paolo Shalsada from Colorado Public Radio has more.
Under a new partnership, state attorneys general will be authorized to investigate complaints made against airlines, ticket agents, and other travel agencies regulated by the federal government. If necessary, states will be able to send complaints to the U.S. Department of Transportation for a priority review. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser said states' involvement will help complaints get addressed quicker.
Without this protocol in place, we didn't know what the status was, and it did take years to get a resolution. We now have a system in place that will help us more effectively protect consumers.
25 states and territories have signed into the partnership, with more likely to join. For NPR News, I'm Paolo Shalsada in Denver.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to meet with the German and British foreign ministers on Thursday. NPR's Rob Schmitz reports the ministers are expected to urge Netanyahu to urge restraint in his response to Iran's attack against Israel over the weekend.
Senior officials in Israel's government tell NPR that British Foreign Secretary David Cameron and German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock are scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu on Thursday. Baerbock is scheduled to arrive to Israel today on a trip where she'll try to urge Israel's leadership to prevent an escalation of tensions in the region.
NPR's Rob Schmitz reporting from Tel Aviv. This is NPR News. Every year, the Library of Congress picks 25 recordings as audio treasures worthy for preservation for all time. NPR's Anastasia Salukas reports this year's roster includes albums by pop culture giants.
The oldest selection is a 1919 recording from early jazz pioneer James Reese Europe, leading musicians from the Black Regiment, widely known as the Harlem Hellfighters. This year's picks also include some pop culture staples, including albums by The Cars, The Notorious B.I.G., Green Day, Blondie, and ABBA. This year, almost every selection was music, except comedian Lily Tomlin's 1971 album, This Is a Recording.
One ringy-dingy. Two ringy-dingies.
It won her a Grammy Award for Best Comedy Recording. Anastasia Tzilkas, NPR News, New York.
British lawmakers are one step closer to passing landmark legislation that aims to prevent young people from ever smoking. The bill would prohibit anyone born after January 1st of 2009 from buying tobacco products. The measure has the support of the country's Labour Party, but is facing pushback from conservatives. At the close on Wall Street today, the Dow was up 63 points. This is NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Proven Winners, with Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, offering hydrangeas, lilacs, evergreens, and more. Their full collection is at provenwinnerscolorchoice.com/NPR.
I'm Michael Obama. This is The Daily.
go straight on.
Cade, when we think about all the artificial intelligence products released over the past couple of years, including, of course, these chatbots we've talked a lot about on the show, we so frequently talk about their future capabilities, their influence on society, jobs, our lives. But you recently decided to go back in time to AI's past, to its origins, to understand the decisions that were made basically at the birth of this technology. So why did you decide to do that?
Keep left.
Because if you're thinking about the future of these chatbots, that is defined by their past. The thing you have to realize is that these chatbots learn their skills by analyzing enormous amounts of digital data. So what my colleagues and I was really focused on that effort. We wanted to look at the type of data these companies were collecting, how they were gathering, and how they were feeding into their systems.
And when you all undertake this line of reporting, what do you end up finding?
We found that 3 major players in this race, OpenAI, Google, and Meta, as they were locked into this competition to develop better intelligence, they wanted to do almost anything with this data, including ignoring and in some cases violating corporate rules and wading into a legal gray area as they gathered this data.
Basically, cutting corners.
Cutting corners left and right.
Okay, let's start with OpenAI, the flashiest player of all.
The most interesting thing we found is that in late 2021, they ran out of data, essentially. They had used just about all the respectable English language text on the internet to build this system. Wikipedia articles by the thousands, news articles, Reddit threads, digital books by the millions. We're talking about hundreds of billions, even trillions of words.
Wow.
So, by the end of 2021, OpenAI had no more English language text that they could feed into these systems. But their ambitions are such that they wanted even more. So here we should remember that if you're one of these companies gathering data at that scale, you are absolutely gathering copyrighted data as well.
Which suggests that from the very beginning, these companies, a company like OpenAI with ChatGPT, is starting to bend the rules.
Yes, they are determined to build this technology. Thus, they are willing to venture into what is a legal gray area.
So, given that, what does OpenAI do once it, as you had said, runs out of English language words to mop up and feed into this system?
So they get together and they say, all right, so what are other options here? And they say, well, what about all the audio and video on the internet? We could transcribe all the audio and video, turn it into text, and feed that into their systems.
Interesting.
So a small team at OpenAI, which included its president and co-founder, Greg Brockman, built a speech recognition technology called Whisper. And then they gathered up all sorts of audio files from across the internet, including audio books, podcasts, and most importantly, YouTube videos. According to my reporting, we're talking about at least 1 million hours of YouTube videos were scraped off of that video sharing site. And YouTube's terms of service do not allow a company like OpenAI to do this. YouTube, which is owned by Google, explicitly says you are not allowed to, in internet parlance, scrape videos en masse from across YouTube and use those videos to build a new application. That is exactly what OpenAI said it did not know that OpenAI was scraping YouTube content and said the company takes legal action over this kind of thing when there's a clear reason to do so. But according to my reporting, at least some Google employees turned a blind eye to OpenAI's activities because Google was also using YouTube content to train its AI.
Wow.
So, if they raise a stink about what OpenAI is doing, they end up shining a spotlight on themselves, and they don't want to do that. But because Google owns YouTube, it defines what can be done with that data. And Google argues that it has a right to that data, that its terms of service allow it to use that data. However, because of that copyright issue, because the copyright to those videos belong to you and I, lawyers who I've spoken to say people could take Google to court and try to determine whether or not those terms of service really allow Google to do this. There's another legal gray area here where, although Google argues that it's okay, others may argue it's not.
And so these companies are essentially enabling each other as they simultaneously seem to be bending or breaking the rules.
What this shows is that there is this belief among their researchers that they have a right to this data because they're on a larger mission to build a technology that they believe will transform the world. And if you really want to understand this attitude, you can look at our reporting from inside Meta. Meta had to scramble to build artificial intelligence that could compete with OpenAI. And at one point, my colleagues and I got hold of recordings of these Meta executives and engineers discussing this problem. And they explored all sorts of options. They talked about licensing books one by one at $10 a pop and feeding those into the models. Wow. They even discussed acquiring the book publisher Simon & Schuster and feeding its entire library into their AI model. But ultimately, they decided all that was just too cumbersome, too time-consuming. And on the recordings of these meetings, you can hear executives talk about how they were willing to run roughshod over copyright law and ignore the legal concerns and go ahead and scrape the internet and feed this stuff into their models. They acknowledged that they might be sued over this, but they talked about how OpenAI had done this before them, that they, Meta, were just following what they saw as a market precedent.
Interesting.
It's a snapshot of that Silicon Valley attitude that we talked about. Because they believe they are building this transformative technology, because they are in this intensely competitive situation where money and power is at stake, they are willing to go there.
But what that means is that there is, at the birth of this technology, a kind of original sin that can't really be erased.
It can't be erased, and people are beginning to notice, and they are beginning to sue these companies over it. These companies have to have this copyrighted data to build their systems. It is fundamental. That could bring
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by C3 Generative AI. C3 Generative AI enables rapid access to secure, traceable, hallucination-free insights from enterprise systems, all while using any LLM, helping enterprises turn the invisible into the obvious. Learn more at c3.ai. And by KeyBank, relentlessly researching to deliver expert-driven insights on trends that matter at key.com/trending topics. Hear the stories shaping the world's conversation. You're listening to The Daily, produced by The New York Times.
88.7.
Hi, I'm Barry Ward, Executive Director of Trees for Houston. I'm also a Studio Society member at Houston Public Media. I believe that together our organizations can change the world. Join me in becoming a supporter of Houston Public Media today on Trees Day. When you give today, your gift is matched and you can plant a tree in the Houston community. Select Trees as your thank you gift and double your impact today. Give online at houstonpublicmedia.org or call 888-909-0887. Thank you.
Support comes from DePelchin Children's Center. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and for more than 130 years, DePelchin has worked to ensure that Houston area children are part of safe and loving families. Learn more at depelchin.org. Support comes from Buffalo Bayou Partnership, hosting Jazzy Sundays in April to celebrate jazz and Houston artists working to preserve it. Jazzy Sundays are open to all from 5 to 7 p.m. every Sunday in April. More at buffalobayou.org, keyword jazzy.
A Times investigation shows how, as the country's biggest technology companies race to build powerful new artificial intelligence systems, they bent and broke the rules from the start. My colleague, Kate Metz, on what he uncovered. So, Kate, walk us through these lawsuits that are being filed against these AI companies.
These suits are coming from a wide range of places. They're coming from computer programmers who are concerned that their computer programs have been fed into these systems. They're coming from book authors who have seen their books being used. They're coming from publishing companies. They're coming from news corporations like the New York Times, incidentally, which has filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft. News organizations that are concerned over their news articles being used to build these systems.
And here, I think it's important to say, as a matter of transparency, Kate, that your reporting is separate from that lawsuit. That lawsuit was filed by the business side of the New York Times by people who are not involved in your reporting or in this daily episode, just to get that out of the way.
Exactly.
I'm assuming that you have spoken to many lawyers about this. Do the companies seem to have a strong case that these companies and say, you know what, this is fair use. You were fine to have scraped this material and to keep borrowing this material into the future, free of charge?
Well, the thing is, even if they can access as much copyrighted material as they want, these companies may still run into a problem.
Exit right.
Pretty soon, they're going to run out of digital data on the internet. One research organization estimates that by 2026, these companies will run out of viable data on the internet.
Wow. Well, in that case, what would these tech companies do?
What many people inside these companies will tell you, including Sam Altman, the chief executive of OpenAI, they'll tell you that what they will turn to is what's called synthetic data.
And what is that?
That is data generated by an AI model that is then used to build a better AI model. That is the vision ultimately they have for the future, that they won't need all this human-generated text.
But is that really a workable, solid plan? Is that considered high-quality data? Is that good enough?
If you do this on a large scale, you quickly run into problems. As we all know, as we've discussed on this podcast, these systems make mistakes. They hallucinate. They make stuff up. They show biases that they've learned from internet data. And if you start using the data generated by the AI to build new AI, those mistakes start to reinforce themselves.
Right.
The systems start to get trapped in these cul-de-sacs where they end up not getting better, but getting worse.
What you're really saying is these AI machines need the unique perfection of the human creative mind.
Well, as it stands today, that is absolutely the case. But these companies have grand visions for where this will go. And they feel, and they're already starting to experiment with this, that if you have an AI system that is sufficiently powerful, if you make a copy of it, if you have two of these AI models, one can produce new data and the other one can judge that data. It can curate that data as a human would. It can provide the human judgment, so to speak. So as one model produces the data, the other one can judge it, discard the bad data, and keep the good data. And that's how they ultimately see these systems creating viable synthetic data. That has not happened yet, and it's unclear whether it will work. But after struggling with that for decades, these companies have finally stumbled on something that they feel works, that is a path to that incredibly ambitious goal, and they're going to continue to push in that direction. Yes, they're exploring other options, but those other options aren't working.
And then turn right.
What works is more data and more data and more data. And because they see a path there, they're going to continue down that path.
Turn right.
And if there are roadblocks there and they think they can knock them down, they're going to knock them down.
But what if the tech companies never get enough or make enough data to get where they think they want to go, even as they're knocking down walls along the way?
If these companies can't get their hands on more data, then these technologies, as they're built today, stop improving. We will see their limitations. We will see how difficult it really is to build a system that can match, let alone surpass, the human brain. These companies will be forced to look for other options technically, and we will see the limitations of these grandiose visions that they have for the future of artificial intelligence.
Keep right, and then continue straight on.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Go
We
straight
appreciate
on.
it.
Glad to be here.
Keep right, and then continue straight on.
The Daily is supported by Colgate University, now in its third century, Colgate is dedicated to intellectual rigor and academic exploration. Learn more about a liberal arts education in New York's Shenango Valley at colgate.edu. For everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day, you're listening to The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times and is distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily at nytimes.com/The Daily.
Go straight on.
That's it for The Daily. I'm Michael Roboto. See you tomorrow.
You're listening to Houston Public Media, and we're in our spring radio on-air fundraising campaign. Your support is essential to keeping public media accessible for our community. Donate now at houstonpublicmedia.org or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Public Media helps nonprofits tell their stories through Community Catalyst. Learn about the needs in our community through data from Understanding Houston, and meet Houston area nonprofits making a difference at HoustonCommunityCatalyst.org.
Jury selection continues for a second day in a Manhattan courtroom where former President Donald Trump is on trial for falsifying business records. Prospective jurors were asked 42 questions aimed at determining whether they can be fair and impartial, such as, can you be fair and impartial? Have you ever been a Boogaloo Boy or in Antifa? And what podcast do you listen to?
Go straight on.
Trump is required to be present in court for this trial that could last until June, and he talked to reporters today before entering the courtroom.
I should be right now in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in many other states, North Carolina, Georgia, campaigning. This is all coming from the White House, because the guy can't put two sentences together. He can't campaign. They're using this in order to try and win an election.
Trump in court, coming up on Today Explained.
On Capitol Hill, the Senate has been presented with articles of impeachment targeting Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Senators are expected to be sworn in as jurors as soon as tomorrow to consider an indictment against Mayorkas, charging him with failing to stop the flow of migrants across the southern border. Tennessee House Republican Mark Green presented the articles to the Senate today.
His refusal to obey the law is not only an offense against the separation of powers in the Constitution of the United States, it also threatens our national security and has had a dire impact on communities across the country.
But the proceedings may not last long. With Democrats narrowly in control of the Senate, they're expected to try to dismiss the charges even before arguments start. Two women who say they were harmed by abortion restrictions that took effect more than 2 years ago are on the campaign trail for the Biden-Harris ticket. From member station WWM, Chuck Quirmbach reports the women took part in a reproductive rights discussion in Milwaukee.
Caitlin Joshua of Louisiana and Amanda Zarowski of
Go
Texas
straight on.
say they couldn't get the timely medical help they needed during their pregnancies after the Supreme Court ruling in the Dobbs case. They're now touring battleground states where abortion rights have been affected.
Turn left.
Joshua says a Donald Trump victory in November could open the door to a national abortion ban.
Passing a nationwide ban is the end goal and the end game here. That means that what Amanda and I experienced could very well be happening in all 50 states if we allow it.
Trump now says he would not sign a national abortion ban, but he continues to take credit for the overturning of Roe versus Wade. For NPR News, I'm Chuck Quirmbach in Milwaukee.
Stocks finished mixed today on Wall Street after two Fed officials warned it may take longer this year before cutting interest rates after inflation came in higher than expected. This is NPR. The NCAA's all-time leading scorer for Division I basketball is now the #1 WNBA draft pick. Caitlin Clark's play is bringing new fans to the sport, breaking TV viewership and attendance records. NPR's Tristan Plunkett tells us that's put a spotlight on pay disparities between the NBA and Women's League.
Under the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement, Caitlin Clark is set to make around $338,000 over 4 years with the Indiana Fever. Compare that to last year's first overall pick in the NBA, Victor Wembanyama, who signed a 4-year, $55 million deal. Clark still has plenty of endorsements following her into the league, but still, the salary imbalance is glaring and disproportionate. It only partly reflects the differences in each league's media deals. Front Office Sports says the WNBA brings in about $60 million a year